It's a tough sport. It's not for everybody. You got to be a little sick to love this game, and we got some sickos.
Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're going to see if Ollie Connolly is a tough grader. Today, we are going through each NFC team, like we did earlier in the week, and grading their offseason thus far. Ollie, how are you as a student in Manchester?
Oh, as a student, it's probably best not to go into the track record of studentness. I consider myself a very fair grader. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I like to try and see the vision. I like to grade on how they view themselves, more so than just me crushing them for what I would have done instead.
Okay, I mean, you can. It's wide open. You can give multiple grades if you really want. And look, you have been a professional grader in the past, scouting these NFL prospects. But this is more of a big picture look, and this has been a big build up to this. Ollie's done a lot of shows for NFL Daily. It's all leading to this. He sent me a document with 4,000 words in it, preparing for this show. So let's go deep on each one of these teams. We have the Cowboys and the NFC East. We're going to start with them. Each team I will just introduce what they've done this offseason, then we'll kick it around, and then we'll give some grades. So probably the biggest move they made was they sent a 4th-round pick for Rashawn Gary. News came out after the fact that he accepted a pretty big pay cut over the last 2 years of his contract, taking $10 million less money than he was due originally. So he is making $32 million over the next 2 years for Rashawn Gary. They traded Osa Odigizua, their defensive tackle, who was making even more money than that. They got a 3rd-round pick for that. They shipped off Solomon Thomas for a 7th-round pick. They tagged George Pickens. That's still hanging out there. They gave Brandon Aubrey, their great kicker, a 2nd-round tender, which means he is due $5.7 million unless someone wants to try to sign him away for a 2nd-round pick. That's probably not going to happen. Jalen Thompson was their biggest, really their only big free agent signing. They gave the former Cardinals safety $22 million guaranteed on a 3-year, $33 million contract. So many of the free agency contracts looked exactly like that this offseason. They brought back Sam Williams. They gave PJ Locke a safety with the Broncos, a small deal for $5 million. Sam Howell's on this team. Were you aware of that? And there's a lot of free agents that they had from their team last year that are still out there. Dante Fowler, Jadeveon Clowney, Kenneth Murray, Donovan Wilson, Logan Wilson. Not sure many of those guys are coming back, but just wanted to point that out. They have $17 million in cap space, which is not a ton. And they have been in the top 6 of cash spending in back-to-back seasons, 4th right now for this year. So I think that informs maybe if you're expecting any more big moves, probably not going to happen. What is the first thing that stands out to you from the Cowboys offseason?
What stands out to me is they're still feeling the pain of the Micah Parsons deal. I know it upsets Dallas fans to hear that right off the top, but having to let go of Odigizua at that price point, I thought was like almost criminal in terms of team building. That skill set, speed off the ball in the interior, is so hard to find. Go and look at the guys who lead in the top 5 in quick pressure rate playing on the interior throughout the NFL. Getting those guys is always the best plays in the league with a 1st-round pick. It's just such a difficult thing to find. They had one of those guys and not quite at that price, and because of Kenny Clark, because of the other transactions, because of Quinnen Williams, they have to let that guy go for a 3rd-round pick. So I really liked overhaul in the secondary. I like Christian Parker coming in as DC. I think it's a smart, innovative, forward-thinking move, the likes of which they've not done for a while there. So I think that's all been positive. I think betting on kind of named players like Rashawn Gary is a bit of a disappointment, that they're still sticking with guys who it feels like they were high on 2 years ago, and they set their free agent board, their offseason planning board from 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, my grade is not going to be that high because Rashawn Gary is just a clearly declining player. That was a really good player, and he's had some injuries, and you could make the argument it's a pretty straight line the last 3 or 4 years that it was at one point, and it's gotten a little worse each year. He's still relatively young. And then you're betting on Kenny Clark, maybe because you feel like you gave up so much, and he's a good leader and everything. But if you're choosing between Kenny Clark and Odigizua, I think it's a clear choice. You'd rather have Odigizua. Clark's not going to get you anything in a trade, but they didn't get great value for him. If you think about what McDuffie and Jalen Waddle got, I would not put Odigizua maybe quite there in terms of trade value, but I don't think it was great value for them. It felt like they needed to move a guy who's a good young player at a fair price. And that it's just it's just rare, and it speaks to the Cowboys are just doing things differently. It just feels like they're always reacting to the last move that they made.
It felt like everything was around this idea we can't stop the run anymore, so we're going to do everything we can and invest everything into stopping the run. Our safeties are excellent run enforcers. We're still trying to find some linebackers out in the streets. We're going to go and get Rashawn Gary, who we know is a declining asset as a pass rusher, but he can still hold the edge as a run defender. And then you step back from it and go, what are you going to do on third down? Where is the pass rush juice? I get Quinnen. If Ezeraku comes back fully healthy, that's beneficial. But one of their best impacts they had on defense was that two-man tandem inside driving everyone up the field, and they just stripped it apart because they wanted to save face and keep Kenny Clark in the building effectively.
I saw a fascinating clip from Bob Sturm, who's covered the Cowboys forever, that I thought was so telling, that he thinks they do poorly in free agency or sit it out in general just because of the way they do business. It's a family operation, and they never like to lose negotiations. They never like to lose leverage. We've seen it with every negotiation that they've ever had with their free agents. They're always low ball, just trying to get a good deal. That's what they get off on, was trying to get a good deal. And it's like, those don't exist in free agency. You have to kind of enter it with the idea that you're not going to get some great bargain and that it's going to go really fast. And Nakobe Dean, for instance, was one where I think that the Raiders just ended up moving faster, and Jalen Thompson ends up being the only real free agent. Like that one. Are you looking forward to the Sam Howell, Joe Milton preseason games though? What a battle.
No, I am not. I will be out those evenings. I feel like, I don't know how, yes, I accept all that about the family business and the speech in Landman, which I'm not sure was a speech, felt like more of a documentary following Jerry around. But how do you square that with trading Odigizua for the third round pick? Where's the family value in trading a really good asset for a cheap price?
Right. And I don't know. It's about, signing the guys quickly. Let's give them a grade. I'll have you start.
I'll give them a C because I do like the makeover of the secondary, and I do think they nailed the DC hire.
We got to put a number on it. I will go 76 as well. It's okay.
This is out of 100?
Yes. That's a C.
Okay, that's a C.
Anyway,
72.
C is 73 to 77, at least in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. We're keeping track of this. Eric was like, this show is going to go faster. Not at this pace. Let's go with the Giants. They signed Calvin Austin, a move we haven't mentioned. Haven't heard the contract terms, which usually means it's not much money, but the former Steelers receiver. They have a Darnell Mooney contract that is up to $10 million, so I'm curious to see the actual numbers on those. I suspect they're both quite low. They also re-signed Isaiah Hodgins and Gunnar Olszewski and said goodbye to Wan'Dale Robinson. That was just the moves at receiver. That was a lot. They re-signed Jermaine Illuminor for $25 million guaranteed. 3 years, $39 million. They brought back Evan Neal, their former top 10 pick, which was surprising. They lost 4 players to the Titans and Brian Dable, Daniel Bellinger, Cordell Flott, Austin Schlottman, Wan'Dale Robinson. They cut Bobby Okereke, and then they did make some good signings. Isaiah Likely got $40 million over 3 years at tight end. Ardarius Washington is a member of the Giants now, the former Ravens safety. They signed Jason Sanders is their new kicker. I like that after watching Graham Gano play hurt way too often. And then they signed Tremaine Edmonds, $23 million guaranteed, way more money than I expected for him, 3 for 36. And Greg Newsome, who we saw in person overseas, got only $3 million guaranteed after a pretty rough year, probably a 1 for 8 deal. That's a lot there. Kind of what stands out as kind of the big picture thinking from the Giants.
I like the high upside swing on Isaiah Likely. I think that's one of the best free agent deals of the offseason. I'm not a Greg Newsome fan, but at that price for a 25-year-old where corners have these seasons where they just go in fuego for 1 year, I think that's pretty good value, and you may hit out the park or you may move on at the trade deadline. So I like that. And then retaining Jermaine Illuminor, probably the most stable right tackle available on the market. He's been in the building. He knows Jackson Dart. So I think that fits well. The bad to me is just, I think the linebacking core is still a real problem. It's a linebacker-based defense. I don't think Tremaine Edmonds, I think that was just a pure, who is the best guy we think is available on the market? We're going to have to overpay to get the guy in. I don't think he's a clean scheme fit. I just don't see him the way they clearly value him. So I'm worried about the cosmetic surgery they've done defensively when it's a pretty radical overhaul in terms of defensive style. Yeah,
that was one of my least favorite contracts in free agency because he basically got the same or close to the same money as Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd, and just seemed like, why? I didn't get it. Off a year, the Bears are cutting him I'm with you though. I really like the Likely deal. I thought Illuminor, for whatever reason, didn't make everything maybe that I projected in free agency, but still was the best option out there. And then they get him back. And then in the end, it sounded like they were pretty in on Wandale and got outspent. But getting Calvin Austin and Darnell Mooney for what I'm guessing combined is going to be half as much as Wandale makes this year and nothing after this year. That's fine. I think they wanted to go a little bigger in free agency, frankly, with John Harbaugh, and it didn't work out that way. But how it worked out, for the most part, I think is solid.
Yeah, I think not committing too much future money as you figure out what you have in Jackson Dahl, what the foundation looks like, and you have this kind of full cultural reset, I think is the smarter path than just kind of going on the spending splurge in the first year. John Harbaugh's got so much rope to build this thing over multiple seasons. In this free agent class, there was no need to go and kind of put all the house on it.
Yeah, $25 million in cap space, which is about average right now. So they still have some flexibility. There's too much cap space. Everyone's got cap space essentially right now. I maybe expected a little more fireworks, but I'm going to give them a B, an 85, just a flat B.
I'll give them a C plus. Is that 78? Does that sound right? I think that a little bit too much of trying to get the band back together with the Baltimore stuff, and maybe not the highest level of Baltimore players in this phase of their careers. The Darius Washington one is a bit like, oh, he knows our system, all this. I'm not sure how impactful a player he is this stage of his career, but the Isaiah Likely one is the key one to me.
For some reason, a lot of their contracts haven't been entered officially, so I wanted to see. I'm guessing our Darius Washington's making very little money, but we don't know because the Giants contracts for the most part aren't in there yet. Let's go to the Eagles, who made a move since I even wrote my notes down. But it's a good thing I'm not too old yet. I'm taking that creatine in the morning. It's all still in there. Hollywood Brown is a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. How about that? They've had to definitely go a little cheap in free agency because they've spent a ton of cash. They do have a lot of cap space right now, but they've lost a lot of players. They've lost Jalen Phillips. They've lost Nakobe Dean. They've lost Reed Blankenship. They also lost Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, who I only point out to remind people that not every Howie swing works. Those were lottery tickets that made sense to me. I thought one of them would have worked out, and they didn't really work out. So not everything they do is perfect. None of those are that surprising. I think they wanted to keep Jalen Phillips, and that was the one that got away from them. Who did they sign? Arnold Ebiketie, a pass rusher from the Falcons for 1 year, $7 million. Jonathan Jones, the former Patriot and commander, am I mixing up my Joneses? Lands in Philadelphia. No, I got the right one. Reek Woolen got only $12 million on a 1 year deal. So a lot of 1 year deals. Johnny Munt is a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm excited about that. They kept Dallas Goedert on what was basically 100% pay cut. That must have been a tough negotiation, but he's staying on a 1 year, $7 million contract. And then Jordan Davis got huge money. 3 for 78 overall. Really just $39 million guaranteed. Wasn't quite as much as it was originally reported. And the A.J. Brown thing is just hanging out over this team in the ether. I'll start there. Do you think A.J. Brown will get traded still?
Yes.
You do? Yeah. Once they've gone down the road this far, I tend to think so too. I think they would have signed Hollywood Brown either way. I'm doubting he's much money, and they need depth. That's the thing. If you trade if you trade A.J. Brown, Ollie, they don't have a 2, they don't have a 3. Now it's Hollywood Brown. It's they're one of the thinner wide receiver groups in the league even before they potentially trade A.J. Brown.
Yeah, and a team that relies on one-on-one winners because the quarterback isn't going to play on time and in rhythm. And even Hollywood Browns, when they brought in, that's not a one-on-one winner. And what stands out to me is that even on the cheaper end of their deals, I was looking for some degree, and I know this is silly to try and do with these guys, but with Sean Mannion coming in, some degree of offensive innovation. Here's a sign that we're moving in a slightly different direction, and Johnny Munt is kind of the only one. It's we're going to have a true third tight end on the roster, so we can maybe lean into that some more in our offense, but beyond that, not a whole lot. It's kind of the similar profile of players. And you mentioned it, their depth has been pretty stripped out, and they've been such a deep team for so long. Even the backup linemen who have struggled before have at least been in that system, been with Stoutland, understand it all. They are just losing players now year after year and losing a lot of their depth. So I think that has to factor into the A.J. Brown conversation, that not only would you lose kind of the linchpin of the offense, but what's behind it now kind of across the board has been stripped away.
Reek Woolen on a 1 year prove it deal with Vic Fangio. I love that. And even Ebiketie, for considering how expensive pass rush is for 1 year, $7 million. Like, if you're going to get these guys to just accept these 1 year deals, I think they were picking kind of the right guys coming right off their rookie contracts, trying to make more money. Those deals made sense. It's just been quiet. I mean, you're saying you're looking for offensive. There are no offensive moves. Like, there just hasn't. They haven't really done anything. I don't know if you like the Ebiketie move or Reek in particular.
I really like the Ebiketie one. That was cheaper than I thought it would come in at. It's just a solid, stable pass rusher who will make more money next year for having been touched by the Eagles and the Fangio of it all. He'll just kind of get $15-16 million in the next cycle. So I love them jumping in on that early, kind of knowing exactly who he is as a player. The Woolen one, I'm willing to kind of see it out and see if Fangio can tap into something. He's just not my kind of player. He goes to sleep far too often in games. I think he's just a constant accident waiting to happen. So he's just, and they're going to try and play in high leverage playoff games. Just not a kind of play for me.
It's going to be fun though. That secondary, just for my entertainment, I love adding him to that mix, even if it's chaotic. And yeah, they have a lot of cap space. So I tend to agree. I think the AJ Brown move is going to a little bit of an incomplete, but right now it's hard to give them too high of a grade considering how quiet they've been. I'll give them a 79.
I'll co-sign that. It's such an incomplete without knowing the full ramifications of Brown.
I love making Ollie and Jordan Rodriguez, by the way, do grades and rankings because, they're usually above such riffraff like that, and I'm making them do it. Washington made a lot of moves. Odafe Owe got one of the most surprisingly huge contracts in free agency, $68 million. That's a real deal guaranteed. I went and checked. 4 years, $100 million. Like that was a legit $68 million guaranteed. Caleb on Chasen will play opposite him. He got a 1 year, $11 million deal. They signed Tim Settle, the former Texans defensive tackle, for 3 years, $24 million, $8 million guaranteed. Really just a 1 year deal, but still more than I noticed. And then they re-signed Dietrich Wise. They signed Charles Omenihu. And that's just the defensive line. All those moves just on the defensive line. Let's keep going, though. Two of my favorite signings in free agency, Nick Cross and Leo Chanel for 2 years, $14 million for Nick Cross, 3 years, $24 million for Leo Chanel at linebacker, $12 million guaranteed for Chanel, good value. They gave Chigo Okonkwo about $9 million a year at tight end, like that value. Rashad White, 2 years. Actually, we haven't seen the contract terms for that, so we're waiting on Rashad White. Amik Robertson got surprisingly good money, kind of a rotational cornerback. They also extended Laramie Tunsil, $52 million guaranteed. Re-signed like 3 of their offensive linemen that you probably haven't heard of, although I thought Chris Paul might get more money elsewhere. They extended Nick Allegretti, so they cut Tyler Biotish. Like they have had about as much movement as possible. I want to start with the defense because that's kind of where most of the moves had happened. What do you think about the vision for a Durante Jones / Dan Quinn defense and these players adding to it?
I love it. I love it if Durante Jones is allowed to kind of implement his style and Dan Quinn doesn't come kind of like sneaking into the room in week 6, week 7, start trying to pivot it back to Quinn's style. They were just so old and slow and rudimentary in what they were doing last season when he got back into the room and kind of tweak things to the old Dan Quinn style to add as much juice as they have, add as much versatility and dynamism that they can basically, with Nick Cross and Leo Chanel, like they can line up in any way you want. They've got straight gas off the ball now up front. I don't think they got themselves a whole bunch of one-on-one winners. I think even someone like Odafe Owe, it's all spring off the ball, and if he wins, he wins, and if he doesn't win off the first step, it's effectively over beyond an effort rep. But they brought in a coach who wants to do all kind of the mug and attack and creativity with the front, and they signed players to that vision, which gets me fired up because I really did think that they would bring Jones in, they would start signing guys who looked a little bit more like the Dan Quinn vision, and then in week 9, week 10, we get the reports that Quinn's heavily involved, he's taking back defensive play calling duties, and the players they sign, the versatility they offer, screams to me it's going to look a little bit more like those Baltimore defenses, a little bit more like the Brian Flores type defense.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, you got to hope that Durante Jones has the goods and that he can deliver a Brian Flores type defense. But if they do, it's almost like you're looking for a different type of player and you can find better value. I just think of all the good free agent signings that Flores and Flores helped the Vikings get when you think about Van Ginkel and Cashman and Josh Metellus, who they developed, and just guys they had a kind of a vision for how they were going to do that didn't cost them that much money to bring on and then become real deal players. And I think that's how some of these signings could end up looking in a few years. I also like the Okonkwo move. I think Allegretti is going to be their center for Tyler Biotish. Was he the one who started a couple games late and they extend Tunsil. I like the Rashad White move. I'm kind of in on the Commanders offseason. It's like it's not 100 for 100, but I think I'm going to give him an A. 93. Oh. Why not? We got to give someone an A.
I went B+ because there's a little bit of overpaying for the lack of their internal development, having so many misfires. Now you got to go pay for it in free agency, and I just really hated the loss of Biadasz. That made zero sense to me. They're changing the whole foundation of their offense to trying to be this under-center move-based team. So they say he is one of the number one picks you would have if you were building out a move-based under-center kind of kick-and-go center type offense. And they just kind of jettisoned him from the building for Nick Allegretti, a guy I like, but fit more of the Cliff Kingsbury style than he fits this one. So that one was just so puzzling to me from what they've messaged they want the offense to look like, and that they were just throwing cash all over the place, that was the guy they decided to be the casualty.
I agree. And I just assumed there was some injury stuff I didn't know about because he did have injuries late in the year, but then he got quickly signed. They do have the most cap space in the league. So we taped on Monday the AFC, and I said the Titans did. Since then, this is a moving target. Some of the Titans deals have gotten entered. The Commanders now have the most cap space in the entire league, and a ton of guys who are still free agents, all those old guys from last year, like Von Miller and Deebo Samuel and Bobby Wagner, for instance. They also had all these low-cost deals from Mariota, Treylon Burks, De'Ami Brown. They've just been active. I think they needed to be, and so I'm going to lower my score to a 91. You talked me down off of it a little bit. That's the NFC East. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back. This is going to turn into one of my favorite annual exercises, the grades after free agency. Back on NFL Daily, we are rolling through the NFC free agency grades with the Chicago Bears and the NFC North up next. Really, the highlights, the big news is how their secondary looks so different. They signed Kobe Bryant, the Seahawks safety, for 3 years, $40 million. Fun deal to imagine him with Dennis Allen. But they let Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker, Nashawn Wright, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and Jonathan Owens all leave from the secondary, which I found interesting. I don't think they were really in on keeping those players. They re-signed Braxton Jones at left tackle, and they signed Jedrick Wills. This is a move we hadn't mentioned on the show. The former Browns first-round pick that was out of football last year trying to get healthy. So that's a flyer where they need a left tackle early this season, or maybe the whole season. They traded for Garrett Bradbury after Drew Dahlman surprisingly retired at center. And other than that, it's been quiet. Devin Bush was the biggest other signing at linebacker, 3 years, $30 million. He replaces Tremaine Edmonds, Neville Gallimore, and Khalif Raymond. Gallimore is a defensive tackle. Khalif Raymond, kind of a fourth receiver, return guy. They both get around $5 million. They had a ton of players sign with other teams. For what it's worth, 13 different players from their team have signed with other teams, which I found interesting. One of the highest, maybe the highest number in the league. And they're out of cap space. And they're in the middle of the pack of cash spent. So I know we've been feeling better about Ryan Poles, but I do think that kind of points to maybe some of the misdeeds of previous years hurt them in this offseason.
Yeah, I've thought Ryan Poles was a clown for a while. I do have to say, I hadn't considered that about the cash in the cap. That kind of points to the fact that maybe he was clownish throughout the early parts of the tenure. I love this. I thought he did a great job. I understand there were some cap restrictions, but it wasn't too high on their own supply of last season, kind of lying to themselves about who they could be going into the next year. I just thought it was smart move all across the board. I thought the Garrett Bradbury deal, when Drew Dahlman retires on you so suddenly, and you don't want to make it so you've got to go into the draft, and there's only really Jake Slaughter who's worthy of maybe a first or second round pick, and you're kind of bucketed where you kind of have to get that guy earlier. Just going at Garrett Bradbury as a serviceable player who played much better last season than he has for much of his career, just locking that down on a really cheap deal, doing it immediately, I thought was really sensible work. Getting a second round pick for DJ Moore is absolute robbery. Unbelievable deal once again from Ryan Poles in the trade market. And I really do like the, for as much as I love the names they had in the secondary, and I like a lot of those players, that it was a pretty clear signal that what they did last year with Dennis Allen, where he cut apart from the structure he had with the Saints and said, we are an all-out attack, let's get after it based blitzing defense. All the signings align with that's who we want to be now. That was not a kind of figure it out on the fly, break glass emergency, our pass rush stinks. I think they tapped into something in where the game is at right now. Allen has kind of embraced it. And so the signing of someone like Kobe Bryant, the signing of Devin Bush, indicate that that's the style they want to go to, but there's a little bit more versatility than they have with the previous group, where if they want to kind of back off and return to how Allen used to play, those guys have played in that style too.
You really need Kyler Gordon to stay healthy, but yeah, the group now still looks good. Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, Kobe Bryant, Kyler Gordon, and then I forgot they brought in Cam Lewis, who was a solid player from the Bills, who will be an option at safety. You figure they'll add more there. You make me want to give them a higher grade. The thing is, they had no pass rush last year, and I know they have cap space restrictions. They still have no cap space. I mean, no pass rush this year. And I get what you mean on Bradbury. That was just bad luck for Drew Dahlman, so I can't punish them in the grades. So they did well considering. But you have questions, I think, at left tackle and a little bit at center just because of injuries and retirement there. So overall...
I agree. The roster's nowhere near perfect, and they're paying for the previous polls misfires, but I think it would have been so much worse to take whatever cap room they did have and try to get in the sweepstakes for just a B to B plus shade pass rusher and just say, well, that's where we're putting all the cash. I think that would have been fooling themselves that the only issue was we didn't have enough sizzle in the pass rush. And I just don't think that's true. I think the team still has pretty poor roster construction at multiple spots. And so they kind of put the cash around and tried to just build a more stable team for multiple seasons. And now they've got those second round picks, which is right in the meat of the edge rushing market in the draft class. And they could maybe dangle one of those if they want to try and get a veteran down the line. So I think that move by move, they've played it really well.
And the DJ Moore trade, as you mentioned, is not to be overlooked when making this grade. And you're right. We would have hammered them if they made the Bradley Chubb contract or even the Odafe Owe contract. I don't think made sense for this team, even if I'm not going to kill it for the Commanders. Didn't love it. I'll give them an 86. How about that?
Is that in the B plus realm?
I mean, do we not have the same scoring process in London? Maybe we don't. In Manchester.
All I had was the letter grade. So I would say a B plus. I could talk myself into an A for getting out of DJ Moore alone, and getting out of DJ Moore for a really valuable asset.
Okay, it sounds like you want like an 89, as close to an A minus as possible. So how we did it, so the listeners, it was like 83 to 87 would have been a B. 80 to 82 would be minus. 88 to, I guess, I don't know if B plus is 87 or not. 88, 89 is B plus, something like that. And then you do that with each grade. Let's keep going. The Lions, this one's a quick one. Nice deal for Cade Bays, the center from the Panthers. Not too much money, filled the big need. After that, other than trading David Montgomery, it's just about a bunch of cheapy moves. And I'll just list off some of these players. They all are making very little money. Teddy Bridgewater, Isaiah Pacheco, Larry Borum is an option at to be like a fourth tackle, third tackle. Roger McCreary, who's bounced around now at cornerback. Christian Izien, who's okay at defensive back for the Bucs. Like Tyler Conklin at safety. They traded for Juice Scruggs. I don't even know if he'll make the Lions, but those are the types of moves. They've been very quiet. They have $30 million in cap space. They lost Khalif Raymond to the Bears. I actually think that might hurt them a little bit. It was a good role player. Dan Skipper retired. They don't have a left tackle. They have no edge after Aiden Hutchinson. It's really crazy. They're pretty thin right now at linebacker, cornerback, interior offensive line. They have some interesting free agents from their own team that are still out there that I'm starting to think are going to come back. But as we stand right now, what do you think of what the Lions are doing?
I love the two additions of Cade Mays and Roger McCreary. I really like Roger McCreary. I don't think the league agrees with me. I thought he had really good flashes in Tennessee, particularly as a blitzer, so I like buying low on him. The Mays one we talked about going into it, that is the ideal scheme fit for Mays and for what the Lions were looking for. Just a big, lumbering, powerful presence in the middle of the line of scrimmage. They will hide him and protect him in pass pro, and I think he's going to play his best ball the next couple of seasons. I am still just puzzled by the lack of juice they have all over the field for a team that's trying to compete at the top end defensively. Not bringing AQM back for the money he got from the Bucs is really puzzling to me. I accept letting Anzalone and some of the kind of the older guys go. That one to me after the breakout was just a little bit jarring, given that they didn't really do anything else.
We're calling Al-Qaid Muhammad AQM.
Yeah,
and you're expecting the audience to get on just as no. Oh yeah, AQM.
Al-Qaid Muhammad.
There we go.
Yeah. To not shop in that market, at least so far, when all those guys are flown off the board, is just pretty puzzling to me.
And I'm waiting to see the money on Muhammad. I don't think it's going to be much. Actually, it's coming up in a bit. I did look it up. Yeah, it's very little money. That one was curious because they do have cap space. So I hinted at the free agents that are on the team that are still out there. They don't have a left tackle really. So isn't Taylor Decker just going to come back? I think there was some hurt feelings that he couldn't agree on negotiation. In the end, I'm guessing they're offering more than any other team, or he'd probably have signed with another team by now. So I think they'll look different if Taylor Decker comes back for one more season as expected, and it's with them. Also, Graham Glasgow hasn't been signed. DJ Reader hasn't been signed. Some of these guys could come back, and I think they kind of need it because this is the thinnest Lions roster since the first year they've been there. It really is. It's great at the top, but it's the thinnest, like, in terms of depth.
It is, and the depth is slow. So I would get worried if they just bring all the boys back because they understand the system and they like Dan Campbell. I think they've got to get so much more explosive and take some flyers on young guys who flamed out elsewhere and bind to your own culture, and we can coach them up and all that stuff, which I think is what they did with McCreary. I think that's the angle they have to look at. I think if we get a couple months down the line, they just keep bringing everyone back, that would worry me.
It's a fair point. There's definitely not offensive linemen or tackles that are just going to be sitting out there, but you can find some defensive backs. You can find some defensive backups, but you really need to find some edge talent somewhere and figure out a way to develop them. It has really been a problem. They've put a ton of resources into their defensive line with pretty mixed results, other than taking a pick everyone could have made with Aiden Hutchinson. All right, I will give them... I think they were working with limited space here, and I just have a bias when it comes to the Lions, so I'll give them an 81. That's a B-.
81?
That's too high, too low? What?
Too high. What? Have they made any degree of needle-moving move? I love Cade Mays, but...
Cade Mays?
They're still exposed at left tackle and at edge rusher. I don't think having a solid pivot is going to change the fortunes of a team who believes they're a contender.
All right, give me a number.
I think it's a C. I think it's on the low end, going towards C minus.
That's a 73, and you've convinced me. I like it when Bill Simmons gets easily convinced if his guest has a good argument, because I'll listen to that. Let's go 79. I just am kind of considering that it's incomplete right now, but it's not great right now for the Lions. We've actually been nicer graders. We had more D's on our AFC. Let's see what we have for the Packers. The Packers... Just when you think you know what they're going to do, they trade for two players or they get two players that are aging. Zaire Franklin from the Colts, the linebacker they traded for, and Javon Hargrave they signed to pretty good money. Otherwise, it's been quiet. They re-signed their own lineman, Sean Ryan, for 3 years, $33 million, $11 million guaranteed, kind of that Mick contract that's been going around. Benjamin St-Juste, who played pretty well for the Chargers last year, gets $10 million over 2 years, kind of replaces Nate Hobbs. Some teams have like a ton of free agents just sitting out there. I've mentioned those. The Packers are not one of those teams. Like, all of their guys have landed elsewhere. Malik Willis, Emmanuel Wilson, Romeo Doubs, Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, who they cut, Enagbari, Nate Hobbs, who I mentioned they tried to cut. They traded away Colby Wooden and Rashawn Gary. So a lot of people out the door. They have $28 million, pretty average in terms of cap space. What do you think?
I thought it was pretty putrid, given the timeline that they're on. And I understand some of their rationale, I think, if I had to guess, is we were really young and explosive, but we're a little bit frenetic and haywire. And so we're going to try and get more savvy vets in the room. But I just look at it in the round once they complete everything, and it's just so uninspiring to stick with the offensive line and bet on internal development, to not try and bring someone into the mix to try and shake things up and maybe displace one of the tackles or the guards. I thought was pretty concerning. I thought the Zaire Franklin deal was just kind of bizarre. I don't know how he fits
so weird.
The system at all. I don't know why getting that guy at this phase of his career fits them in any way, having let a really explosive linebacker go for all the faults of Quay Walker. I just don't know why 1-to-1 you would not just pay that contract over bringing Zaire Franklin in. So just across the board, I just found it very strange.
He's making Zaire Franklin $7 or $8 million, so I guess they could have thought that's a good deal for him, but it's really not. It's probably about what he would get in free agency, if that. I saw an interesting comment from one of the Packers beat writers, and I wish I could credit him right now, that maybe some of the guys that they let go were a little bit more about behind the scenes culture fit-ish, injury-ish, but maybe more culture fit, because the writer made sure to say, well, that's not talking about Enigbari, Malik Willis, or Romeo Dobbs. So it's basically the rest of them. You can just fill in the gaps who the rest of them was. So I was like, okay, interesting if that's part of the calculus, but it's hard to put that into my grade. There's not a lot to talk about here. I'm going to go, they're getting punished because it's like, I'm sure this happens with English teachers. If you just have a bunch of great students in a row and you're giving solid grades and then you get a clunker, you're like, all right, finally I can give someone a D. So I'm going to give them a D. Let's give them a 68. I don't get it.
I'm giving them a D too. A team that's on the cusp of that, and I know they've had the youngest roster in the league for 2 years, but them getting older and slower at specific positions, I just find completely puzzling.
And the Packers fans will be like, well, this is what we do. We don't do it in free agency. And for the most part, I think they wish they did do more things in free agency. It went poorly when they tried last year with Aaron Banks and Nate Hobbs, and maybe they were afraid. But is that working? Like, not doing it in free agency? Like, is it really working? I kind of don't think it is. I think they want more, considering the quarterback and the coach that they have. They could be better. Let's go to the Vikings. They signed Kyler Murray, and they only have to pay him $1.3 million. What a nifty trick by this Vikings team to make me look at their season coming up so differently when they went into this offseason in the biggest cap hell of any team in the league. They got Aaron Jones to take a pay cut down to $5.5 million, so he stayed. They re-signed Eric Wilson. This was easily the biggest contract they signed this offseason, which is crazy. The rush linebacker, he gets $12.5 million guaranteed. It's not that big of a contract. It's 3 years, $22 million, but they just haven't made any other moves. A move around the edge that I like, Brian Flores pointed at James Pierre from the Steelers and said, I want that guy. And he got him for only $3.7 million guaranteed on a 2-year deal. They had some players retire. CJ Ham, Ryan Kelly, their center, retired. They cut Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, who were making big money and got deals elsewhere. Harrison Smith may or may not retire. We don't really know that right now. It's definitely been a step back offseason for the Vikings, and yet making Kyler happen and the couple little moves that they have, to me, have all been like doubles to better. And so I really like their offseason so far.
I agree with you. I think it's disappointing, I think, to lose the solid, competent players. I think Jalen Naylor can be a really good player down the line, so losing him, I think, is disappointing. The Hargrave and Allen ones, they just didn't work in Kelly. There's not much you can do with the injury history there. But when you go from incompetent quarterback to competent quarterback, I know that Kyler Murray has his faults, and I pointed out many of them before, but it's a massive bar raise, I believe, over JJ McCarthy. So if you do that at that price, how is that not a great offseason? That's what it comes down to me. And you can talk about all the stuff on the margins. I think the James Pierre deal is an unbelievable pickup for them. It's just a way cheaper than I thought flyer on a guy who'll probably just be better being in the orbit of Brian Flores. So to go from bad quarterback to, I think, above average starting quarterback at that cost is as good as anyone can do in an offseason.
Yeah, you don't have a ton of juice on offense outside of Jefferson and Addison, which is quite a big except for. But it's thin at wide receiver. Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason will get you by at running back, but you would like a little more juice there. Hawkinson also came back, I should have mentioned, on a reduced deal. They hadn't got all the details there, but it sounds like he's taking less money in exchange for hitting free agency sooner. So you really look through their roster. I don't see crazy holes. Even the competent veterans you mentioned, like cutting Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, and those were cap moves. But they have some young guys that are pretty solid on the defensive line. And I see a contender. I think Kyler saved this entire idea of this Vikings build that they can just stay right there in contention.
I agree with that. I do worry about another year of Flores going 12 with that system. It's just the sustainability of defense year to year doesn't work that way. Does he have another trick up his sleeve? I'm not so sure. He's kind of pushed his chips all the way in for a very unique style. And at some point, I think it could crack or get found out. And I wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of that season, which could be coming up. But the defensive line point you mentioned is a good one, because Jalen Redmond is the most valuable piece they have in the middle of that defense. And so keeping him at a really cheap deal to let the expensive big names go makes a ton of sense to me. It would just be nice to have a few more guys in the rotation, but I think you can just find those guys all the way up through training camp. There's just always an older interior defensive lineman out there who can give you serviceable rotation snaps.
Right. They had these other young late picks, Tyron Ingram Dawkins and Levi Drake Rodriguez, who played like serviceable snaps, and they'll be in the mix. Jonathan Grenard is on this roster still. There were reports the Eagles were interested in trading him, that he was available for a day 2 pick. So watch this space, but they've gotten through the cap issues in a way, because you had to be cap compliant when the new league year starts. They have $6 million in cap space, which is basically nothing. You have to sign a rookie class. They don't really have it now. Maybe they'll trade Grenard, which would hurt. We'll see. But right now, I'm going to give them, considering the limitations. I consider the limitations, so I am grading on a curve. They were second, by the way, last year in cash spending. So sometimes when you spend a ton of cash one year, it comes back to the pack the next year, and that is where they're at. They're towards the bottom of the league. This year, they fired Kwesi. I don't know if that counts in.
Yeah, that's a couple of great bump.
I don't know. I think I'll just go 80. That's kind of it's fine.
Yeah, I gave a B. I think 80 is fair. I was worried you were going to try and talk me into something higher, so I'm glad that we're aligned.
80, 81, 82. If a B would be an 84, 85 from you, but we're throwing out numbers there. NFC South. Tua Tagovailoa is on the Falcons. There's some moves that just I haven't taken enough time to process. I will go through the whole spiel, but do you sometimes read books or movies that while you were reading or watching them, they were okay to good, but they stick with you?
Oh yeah.
It's takes a while to really understand, almost to I feel like Tua Tagovailoa to the Falcons, I haven't fully grasped what that's going to mean for all of our lives, Ollie.
No, I don't buy that it's the good scheme fit that people are talking about. I think that I accept people view Tua as kind of point guard type player, and he gets the ball out quickly, and that could work with Kevin Stefanski. But Stefanski's offense is way more about quarterback movement, about true stretch, when it's rolling the way he wanted to roll. And the only season it's not really run like that was when Joe Flacco got off the couch, went absolutely maniacal, and was just dicing people up down the field, which is not Tua's skill set in any way. That was not designed up by Kevin Stefanski. He had a guy just go en fuego off the couch, but it mostly requires a true stretch element with real backside conflict on defenders, where the quarterback has a real ability to roll out and throw on the move and be a real running threat themselves. And that's just not Tua's game. So it's going to be from the gun, trying to pick people apart. And I can see that vision with the pieces they have with Pitts, with Drake London, with Bijan, that I can kind of get myself there. But I just don't think it's a one-to-one skill set thing. And I don't think it's at all. If you're building any kind of infrastructure, which they may not be for Michael Penix, the skill sets are in no way similar. And just because they both throw left, which does help in terms of designing the playbook and building things out, there's just no overlap there in the skills of the two guys. And I just don't think Tua is a natural fit for what Stefanski's done at his best. He may evolve, and that would be, I think, a benefit for Kevin Stefanski, but it felt like a tired offseason to me. And that's been my complaint about Stefanski throughout the offseasons, that I worry he's going to come in tired, out of ideas. And this whole thing felt tired and out of ideas to me.
Fair. I don't think he's going to have that much juice, but in terms of personnel, you have Matt Ryan, you have Ian Cunningham, but in terms of choosing a quarterback, obviously he's going to have a big voice. And they had a choice, if you really think about, there was 3 quarterbacks. It was very unique this year that essentially could start for you that were coming for free because their old teams were paying them. Actually 4 if you include Kirk Cousins in that mix, but obviously they weren't going to be that team. And it was Geno, it was Kyler Murray, and it was Tua. And they went really early on just jumping on the Tua train before Kyler was even really available. I don't know. Here's one thing I know before I get into all the moves, Ollie, that you threw out there. I can promise you they are not building an infrastructure for Michael Penix. I mean,
which is reasonable, and I would prefer to watch Week 1 with Tua at quarterback than I would Michael Penix at this point. I know he's got the injury, but if you just ask me who do you want to watch run the offense in Week 1, I do like the idea of Tua, just accuracy, spread it around to the weapons. I'm into that, but anything beyond that, I just really don't think he fits what Kevin Stefanski's offense has looked when it's at its best. Kyler is a tricky one anyway, because Kyler hates going under center and rolling out. That's just not how he wants to play, even though the skills are there to be really effective at it. So I can understand why they say we're just not interested in that style of player, but Tua isn't that guy either.
Right. And there was a moment in Tua's career where we might have been looking a little too hard, but it was he is making a few improvised plays. There are a few off-schedule plays there. If he can just sprinkle those in, you got something, but those have gone away. I think he's less mobile, whether it's the concussion issues or just his athleticism as he remains in the league and the hits that he's taking. He just hasn't looked like that guy. I think a fun idea for a show, I just thought about it when we were talking about Penix, would be like the disrespect rankings, because I might rank how the Falcons have publicly spoken about Michael Penix as more disrespectful than the Vikings in terms of their talking about J.J. McCarthy. It's like could not be more clear that they don't really count on Michael Penix at all. It's just like, wow, okay.
I think the McCarthy one is an all-timer. I don't know if I've ever seen an organization so publicly say, we think this guy stinks. Some of you guys keep reporting we actually think he might be okay, and we're telling you week after week he's terrible.
It's fair. It's close, though. The Penix stuff is not cool. Here's what else they did. It's been a quiet offseason. We'll keep this one quick. They signed a handful of pass catchers for cheap money. Jahan Dotson, who actually got kind of like a mid-tier, low number 3 receiver type of contract, which is a worthy bet. I don't hate that. Olamide Zaccheaus is back for cheap money. Austin Hooper, the former Patriots tight end, is back as like a backup to Kyle Pitts, who they tagged. They signed some volume in terms of defensive players. Aziz Ojulari is going to be there. Ebukam is there. Deshaun Hand from the Chargers is here. Christian Harris, the linebacker from the Texans, is here. Nick Folk is on this team. Overall, they kind of took a step back, though, if you kind of look at the players that they lost. Tyler Algier, Darnell Mooney, Arnold Ebiketie, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, D. Alford. Not amazing players, but I think more has left the building than has really come into the building. They have $22 million, not a ton in cap space, but some. And one thing I've noticed should be on the Falcons fans' radar, like not spending a lot of money the last 2 years. 2 years in a row. Just want your team to be spending money. That's what I want. If like they're pretty low in cash in both of those years. So that maybe speaks to the poor cap management. Overall, I'm going to give this offseason a C, like a low C, 73.
I'm going to give it a D. Didn't love the hires anyway going into it. And the players you just listed out, they signed very similar archetype of players who are worse than the players they let leave the building. I think Caden Ellis is really good. They let him go. I really like Darnell Mooney. Algier fits a pretty valuable role. Onyemata, similar, where it's like, I know you can get those guys pretty cheap, but he's good at what he does. And the guys they brought in to replace them just aren't at the same level to me.
Not a lot to believe in right now. That's not true of our next team. And it's why it is time for charging into the offseason, presented by Apple Card for all your game day purchases. Download the Apple Card in the Wallet app today and start earning daily cash back on all your game day purchases, from tickets to tailgate munchies to merch, subject to credit approval. We had to give the Panthers the honor of charging into the offseason because they spent that money, $60 million in real guaranteed money to Jalen Phillips on a 4-year, $120 million contract. They got Devin Lloyd in the building for only $15 million a year, $25 million guaranteed. That's very similar to these other linebacker contracts that were out there this offseason, especially Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker, but not even that much more than the other ones, like Tremaine Edmonds, for instance. They signed Rasheed Walker to a deal. We're still waiting to see the terms. I heard some whispers that his lack of a market might have been because of his health and because of some physical concerns with Rasheed Walker. They also made a lot of small moves. John Mechie, they added for depth. Luke Fortner, who was okay for the Saints at center last year, might be the starting center here. They brought back sometime host of the show, J.J. Jansen, to be their long snapper. Once again, one of the longest tenured players in the history of the Panthers. And at this point, the NFL, who knows? And then this show is primarily a show, Ollie, for me to like catch all the things that fell through the cracks. And it is partly to remember that Kenny Pickett is got $4 million from the Panthers. Way more than I would have expected, and it's on this roster. So is Andy Dalton for now, but they keep saying they're going to cut him, but they haven't actually cut him yet. Let's start at the top. What do you think of the Phillips Lloyd moves?
I love getting the blue chip players. I love giving Ejiro Evero some actual human players who can play in the NFL on defense, giving him a chance to actually do something with good players. I thought the Lloyd contract was wild. As you mentioned, that it's how comparative it is to other players. I just think he is in a tier above all the other guys who are available in free agency. So I thought he'd go for significantly more, and I'm surprised he didn't just go back to Jacksonville. given that was the market. The Phillips one I do think is a pretty heavy overpay given the health concerns, the injury history, how he just wins as a one-on-one rusher compared to paying elite money for the guys who can just beat up on any kind of tackle in the NFL. I think he's a little bit more slippery than it is like true straight juice and power, which is how usually the best guys in the league win year after year. But if you wanted to go and get pass rushing juice, you were either shopping in the Odefe Owe market and hoping for the best, or you can get a guy who truly does have kind of top 5 in the league type production within him, I think, if he plays every snap in a season. So I understand why they went for Phillips. They went for the best thing they could on the market. I think there's a little bit of them getting burned by Milton Williams last season and just deciding we are going to pay whatever it takes to get this one over the line. And so I don't love that from a team building perspective, maybe adding an extra couple of dollars on there just to make sure you get it done, having been burned in the past. But all of it made sense to me.
That part of it made sense, and I did think Milton Williams was absolutely a factor. I also think they had to go way over the top of what the Eagles were offering in the end. I have a feeling Phillips would have taken less money to play with the Eagles. The Eagles were offering definitely in the 20s, whether that was 22, 24, 25, who knows? I don't really know. I think the Panthers had to pay a little bit of we're the Panthers tax on that and really give them the guarantees. And they got it. And it's just the right time in their team build to do it. I do hate the risk because of his injuries in the past, where like in a best case scenario, he lives up or gets close to this value and stays healthy. There are plenty of other scenarios, whether it's performance or injury, where he doesn't. But I think if they were going to make a risky move like that, this was the time to do it. I don't hate it.
I agree with that. And I think if you just package the contracts together of Phillips and Lloyd and you said they got these two players for this combined value, I'd be like, okay, that's great. That's solid value for two, I think, potential game-changing players. They just haven't had anything like that on defense for years now.
Well, they could also say we got Jalen Phillips for, I believe, about the same guaranteed money as the Bills got DJ Moore. So you feel good about that. Feel good about that. It's probably nothing, but I noticed it. Both Rico Dowdle and A'Shawn Robinson left the Panthers, and they were both kind of salty about it and made negative comments about the Panthers. Just something I noticed. Maybe Rico Dowdle was simply that like they didn't value me, but A'Shawn Robinson in his press conference with the Bucs kind of like called into question how things were run in Carolina. Just something I noticed from these two guys.
Something to know. I love Rico Dowdle because he does seem to believe he's Eric Dickerson and being held back by the organization. I admire that level of confidence.
Yeah. I don't know if it was anything more than that. I don't really think this is a thing, but it was interesting. And A'Shawn is in the division. We're gonna get to him in just a second. Also, Yosh Nijman retired. I hadn't mentioned that. Offensive lineman who had a pretty good career as a late rounder, undrafted guy. And yeah, they lost Cade Mays, who they got outspent for. Not a ton of cap space here for the Panthers. Did we give them a grade? No, we didn't. It wasn't everything I wanted, but the Devin Lloyd really makes me enjoy it more. So I'm going to give them a B, 85.
I'll go A-. Where does that get us numbers wise?
Nice.
In the 90s? I think A-, and it would have been an A if not for just I know they had to overpay for Phillips, but it's to me a pretty dramatic overpay with the injury concerns.
They did take two of my top 10 players, and then Walker ended up in my top 30 somewhere. They got him for cheap. There might be an injury situation there, but that really I love that move considering where they were at. Just they needed something respectable. All right, I'm bumping it up to an 88, 89. All right, let's get to the Bucs. The most money they spent per year, it was a tie between Cade Otton, our guy, and A'Shawn Robinson. I was really surprised A'Shawn Robinson, who's been just a workman-like rotational defensive lineman, got $10 million. It's really just a one-year contract, so nothing in the future. But Cade Otton also got $10 million a year on a 3-year deal. It's fully guaranteed, $20 million, so the first 2 years essentially guaranteed. They signed 2 ex-Lions, the Bucs, and Al-Qaid Muhammad, we mentioned. That's a contract that's up to 6. So a lot of times that's like a $4 million contract. Alex Anzalone got $12 million, the linebacker from the Lions, 2 years, $17 million. Similar deal for Kenneth Gainwell, who got 2 years, $14 million. The Steelers MVP adds to the backfield with Bucky Irving. I liked bringing back Otton. You couldn't bring back everyone, But they lost Mike Evans. I think they wanted to keep Mike Evans, didn't they?
Yeah,
Maybe not that
I think
much.
so.
You would think so, but his contract is so low. It makes me wonder. Rashad White is gone. Jamel Dean is gone. Hassan Reddick and Levante David are both out there. I think Levante David is retiring. And Jake Browning is on the Buccaneers. Do you know that?
I did know that.
Yeah, because
Not
you did all that
inspiring.
prep. That's not overly exciting. That's a downgrade, I think, from Teddy. Middle of the pack in terms of cap space and cash. Not really a lot to talk about there. Little curious. I think the Evans move threw them for a loop to start their offseason. Or they just didn't want him because he basically got a 1 year, $14 million contract. Mike freaking Evans.
I think they knew he was gone and they tried to a face-saving offer. I thought this was almost an apocalypse of an offseason, frankly. I really respect Jason Light. He sees football the way I see football. I like guys who see football the way I see football as a narcissist. This is, I think, as bad as it can go when everything you've built towards was we are going to at some point put the chips in. We're going to try and have a second run at this thing. We're going to try and win at the back end of this Baker Mayfield contract. We are searching the market for edge defenders. Can we get Max Crosby? We don't have the guts to quite do the deal before the Ravens do it and it falls through. Can we go and get Trey Hendrickson? We get beat by the Ravens shenanigans for Trey Hendrickson. Where else can we go? In the meantime, as we are kind of signaling to the veteran on our roster, our future Hall of Famer, I promise you, this is the year we're going in. We're going for it. You can't get the deals done. And then he decides, I'm out of it. The culture doesn't fit for me anymore. It's not a winning culture. You're bringing Todd Bowles back again when I was expecting him to move on. I'm out. I think all around what their goals were, which was to go and get a premier A1 pass rusher that they've been chasing for so long, had the ammunition to do it, had the will to do it. They lose out on that, and it costs them the most important player in their franchise.
It's a convincing argument. I could even think you're absolutely right in terms of where they are in the team build. This is the time to go. But that was also their year last year, and they didn't even make the playoffs in one of the worst divisions in football. It really didn't get enough national attention. A, because they're the Bucs, and then B, because the Bengals and the Bills and the Ravens were happening to various degrees. I shouldn't kill the Bills too much. They were very close to making the Super Bowl. But the Bucs, it was kind of a catastrophic season, and they decided not to get off everything. And yeah, this offseason feels like treading water. And some of the comments from Mike Evans, and he's tried to play both sides of the fence and be appreciative of the fans, did indicate to me a little bit that he felt like the culture was stale when he talked about what he was looking for San Francisco, maybe what he wasn't getting. And yeah, it's disappointing because this team should be more fun than it is, but really nothing you can hang your hat on in terms of this offseason other than Kenny G. It's fine.
Kenny
G costs a lot of money.
It's a very good pickup. I love them re-signing K. Dotton. I thought the Anzalone contract and signing was a big giveaway. They've been crying out for a really explosive kind of one-step pop and drop mugged up linebacker for 3 seasons. They should have gone and got Devin Lloyd. He was available to them in a trade. They said no thank you. Missed out on that one dramatically. Levante, they think's retiring every season. They decide not to replace that. They go and get Alex Anzalone, which is a carbon copy of what Levante David gives them and is not a player who plays as an explosive pop and drop mugged up linebacker. He's a run and chase, run and rally, high five everyone type player. So they just go 1-to-1 across the board on plays that weren't good enough to get them over the top anyway. They're telling everyone who will listen, this is the year we're making the big moves. We tried last offseason. We got a little bit of cold feet at the asking prices. It's going to be this year. We're running it back with Todd. The only way we can improve the team is to take the assets we have and try and go and get a premier pass rusher. And I don't quite agree with that. I don't think that they're quite where they believe they are in terms of competitiveness to win the whole thing, but they think they are. And then I just thought they got cold feet on every major move.
Also, haven't really heard about a Baker contract extension. That's kind of looming over. Is he going to be their guy long term? They need a better season out of him overall. Give me your Bucs grade.
It's a D. I would have it as an F, but because the Crosby deal fell through and that's still hanging out there, I'm not ruling out that they could maybe get back involved in that.
Okay, so a D, a 65 for Ollie. I'm definitely factoring in the fact that Jason Light confronted Connor Orr for his takedown of the Bucs right before they had a great season. We've had Jason Light on the show. He always calls back to things that people say about him. So that's a factor here. And yet I feel like I got to give him a 69. He's still in the D range here. If they want to clip this and bring it back to me after all these moves work out well, Al-Qaheed Muhammad actually ups his sack total, then I'll be happy to take it because I want the Bucs to do well. All right, let's take a break and we will wrap up our NFC grades with the NFC West right after this. Back on NFL Daily. I always feel like, Ollie, that we're the kids that are letting down our parent, Eric Roberts, when we go like a little too long on the show. He just likes a nice, tight off-season show, but these are going to be unique shows in terms of really recapping it all. We're gonna sprint home here, or not. The Cardinals had a quiet off-season, I would say. They signed Isaac Seumalo to a 3-year, $31 million contract. Another one of those. 15 of that is guaranteed, so really like a year and a half is guaranteed. Kendrick Bourne and Tyler Algier are both on this team for 2-year contracts, around $5 to $6 million each. That's about what Gardner Minshew is making, 5.75, which sounds like a backup, but it's actually more than Jacoby Brissett is making, so that's interesting. They got James Conner to take a big pay cut to come back. He is only making $2 million this year, which is real backup money. That's interesting. And then just a ton of micro moves. Roy Lopez, who they've had before, comes back. Andrew Billings, defensive lineman. A couple offensive linemen, Matt Pryor, Elijah Wilkinson. Really small stuff. They are 4th in the league in terms of cap space and 27th in terms of cash spending. They also did not spend a lot of cash last year. This is the team that was asking their players to pay for their lunches. Someone was saying Kyler Murray was like getting extra meals on that visit to Minnesota. That's why he signed there. He's just like, wow, the salad bar is incredible. So it'd be nice to see the Cardinals spend a little more money, even if their fans would I think push back to me, Ollie, and say, no, this year is about the reset and we're thinking about 2027. What do you think?
It's about the reset with a GM who's been here this long and promises us the roster is more talented than it was allowed to be shown last season. I don't see any kind of vision. They're in a division with 3 freight trains, and there's not even a let's just tear the thing completely down. Let's go and trade Buddha, the most valuable thing we have. Let's go and trade Marvin Harrison Jr., see if there's a market there. There's not taking one of the tracks of either semi-competitive rebuild or just saying we're ripping it down to the studs. This is just so meh and bland and in the middle and cheap bets on players I'm not sure are that great or are going to do anything for you by the time you may even consider being competitive again. I just find it completely puzzling, even down to, you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but wasn't there option to try and get Jimmy Garoppolo in the building? They're going to let Kyler Murray go and then call Jimmy Garoppolo and see if they can get him in the building. It's like, I just don't understand what the moves are for a GM who is supposedly at the very, very end of this thing because he's got the second crack now with another head coach. They retain the defensive coordinator. They're signaling that they think the roster was better than it was proven under the last coaching staff. It was not as good as they believe it was, and they make moves all on the margins.
Yeah, you can't sell a rebuild, a restart with a team, with a GM that's been there this long. You just can't do it. And you can't sell it when you're saying we like his draft picks. And yes, if you look at Monty Ossenfort's drafts, he's hit plenty of singles. And he hasn't had a lot of strikeouts. Like they've been solid singles, some doubles, some misses, but overall it's been okay. Like they have a lot of NFL players, but it's just not enough. And Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, turned them down, according to the report. Jordan kind of mentioned, Mike LaFleur has the connection, but you get knocked in the grades for that too. You weren't even good enough for Jimmy G, who might be retiring and maybe just his heart isn't in it anymore, or just likes being Matthew Stafford's backup and
it's good
he's
life.
kind of into that. And if the Rams don't want him, might be just like, yeah, well, I've made a lot of money. I really like LA. It's been a good run. I don't know what to say about this team. I don't know. I'm just gonna throw my grade on right away because I'm not gonna break down the Roy Lopez move for that long. D- 62.
I'll go with an F, factoring in everything they've done over the whole offseason. You got to pick a lane at some point. And I just feel like they are straddling through the middle to who knows what. Maybe they crush it in the draft, but even then it still feels like they are so far away when you look at what's left in the division.
Tyler Algier for that money is fine. He's getting like $6 million a year. But even him and Bourne for $5-6 million a year, it's like, even those signings are kind of like pick a lane. Gardner Minshew is a pick a lane signing. Why not do the Malik Willis move that the Dolphins did it? They did it despite totally resetting and having very little cap space and having to figure it out. The Cardinals are swimming in cap space. They have no use for it. What are they doing? I don't know.
When you see like Devin Lloyd out there for that kind of contract and you have oodles of cap space, it just makes no sense to not just try and make a deal.
You need to have good young players.
Yeah, their roster may be 2 or 3 wins better than it was last year. If you just look particularly on the defensive side with all the injuries they had, these moves do what? Maybe an extra game if you're lucky. So it's still leading to nowhere for me.
Right. I agree with the idea that they were better than their record showed last year, that they were maybe more of a 6-7 win team, but they're in the hardest division in football and they're getting worse. Like they're not getting better because everyone else is getting better, including the Rams. Fascinating offseason. They trade a first, the 27th pick, a third, a fifth, and a sixth for Trent McDuffie, and they pay him $50 million fully guaranteed, although the second year of the contract, they'd have to cut him after 1 year. Basically, they're guaranteeing about, I think it was $78 million practically. So it's not really 100 like they said, but it's pretty close, 78. It's really more of a 2-year deal that they could get out of if it went really poorly. And so he's a little closer because it's an extension to $28 million a year, not 31. But that's not crazy inflation. That's still the tippity top of the market for Trent McDuffie. All those picks. They also give his teammate Jalen Watson, the cornerback, $26.5 million guaranteed on a 3-year, $51 million deal. They re-signed Cam Curl to a deal that I think was quietly influential because Cam Curl, I think, set the market for all these safeties. The safeties finally got paid, and I really think it's because, Cam Curl got like 12 a year, and we're all about the same range as Cam Curl, and I think they're right. And finally, safeties got paid. So they re-signed Curl and Quentin Lake. They really haven't lose much at all, which is the feather in their cap of this offseason. Kobe Durant is the best player that they've lost, the cornerback. Rob Havenstein retired. Jimmy G's a question mark if he's going to play or not again. And they have about $22 million in cap space. If I'm going to bang on some of the other teams for not spending cash, they are in the bottom 5-6 teams in cash spending in back-to-back years. You couple that with the awful food selections at SoFi Stadium. Let's break out the checkbook here, Stan Kroenke. Like, how are we still eating 1980s food? The Rams hate this whenever I bring this up. I like it, though. I like that they aggressively went after their biggest weakness. What do you think?
Yeah, I apologize to the audience for continuing the Rams glazing of NFL Daily through everything they do, except for the food. But this was everything a contender should do. I think they just are operating on a different timeline to effectively everyone else, given that Stafford could retire at the end of next season, maybe the year after. And so just deciding we're going to overhaul the secondary. We're not going to lie to ourselves and talk about player development and, hey, those guys held up steadier for portions of the season than we thought they should do based on their collective talent. It just was not good enough. And I also think it made them way more versatile that on third down now, if they just go straight man coverage with McDuffie and Watson, they're set there in a way they just weren't last season. And I think they can do a bit more in the blitz and pressure game because of the corner group they've got now. So they made themselves more talented overall. They made themselves more dynamic and versatile as a defense. And they just went all in on fixing the core problem of the roster. And if you look at it now heading into the draft, they effectively have no holes and they have the 13th overall pick to go and have fun with. They can either just go and chase offensive firepower. They could move up in the draft. They've tried every year for like 3 years to try and move up in the draft. They could look at doing that. So there isn't, I think, a more complete roster in the league right now.
I don't disagree. I think they need to be careful. They traded the pick, and I think they will be careful. I think they will try to keep nailing these picks because they are going to need the nucleus after everyone leaves. And that's the thing is, it feels like it's this window because of Devontae and Stafford specifically. And yet, if they can just replace the quarterback, which is a big, difficult challenge that will be in front of them, I don't think they're going to be in bad position long-term at all in terms of the assets that they have. Obviously, Puka and the coach and the management, and you're investing in players on defense, Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie specifically, but also Quentin Lake, like young players that should be productive, good players for you for the rest of this decade. So, they've been on a heater in terms of just slowly getting better every year. They definitely feel like this was a Super Bowl that got away from them. What did you think about the news after the fact that Davante Adams could have been available in a trade if they got A.J. Brown, which now they're getting out there that they're no longer in the A.J. Brown market. So maybe trying to calm the waters there with Davante Adams.
I thought Davante was exceptional last season. There was some strange chemistry stuff with him and Stafford throughout the season, just not always being on the same page. I still thought he looked phenomenal and was like an absolute killer on third downs. He's obviously crushed people in the red zone all season long, so I would still be heavily in the Davante Adams market. But AJ Brown, just with the body type, the physicality, is I think just a level above it where Davante Adams is at this stage of his career. So if you could do a deal to go and get one of the 6-7 best receivers in the NFL, if the medical checks out, you put anything on the table that isn't the quarterback.
Right. It would have been a little tricky, but they do have $22 million in cap space to like make that all work. It smelled to me like another team just trying to throw a little stink bomb into the Rams building. I'm not even kidding. Just like, oh, you know that it's like, well, we talked about a lot of like different scenarios. Was there a scenario with one team out there that Davante could have been a fail? Like maybe, but I don't think that ended up being too serious. All right. I'll give an A- here for the Rams, a high A-, 92, whatever that is.
I'm gonna go A+. I don't care about, hey, the timeline can push beyond this. It's about parades. You want to have a parade. I think they put themselves in the best position possible to have a parade next offseason. If 3 years down the line, hey, the timeline, you can extend it, whatever. Sean McVay will be on NBC or on a beach probably in 5 seasons. Just go and try and get as many parades as possible while Stafford is healthy.
It's tough because it's just such a high bar, but that is the whole point. Like last year, they had that team. Even the year before, I feel like the Eagles were a better team, but they felt like they have been in the mix, 4 or 5 times now under McVay, where you could say at the end of the year, that's probably one of the best 5 teams, and they've gotten one title out of it. That is sort of how things work, but it's just a brutal business. They absolutely should be right at the top of the mix. I'm curious if you think the 49ers are there as well after they signed Mike Evans. Basically a 1 for 14. I mean, the actual contract terms were shocking to me. They control his rights for 2 more seasons after that with basically team options, no risk to the team. Either his agent didn't do well or he had no leverage. I would have just taken the 1 for 14 if I was Evans. Like, he gave away his rights for the 2 years after that too. They also added Christian Kirk. I'm going to stop there before I get into all the other moves and let's just talk Evans and what you think about his fit with the 49ers and the fact that he had to settle for a deal that was that low.
Yeah, I think settling for the deal when he kind of said publicly he was doing his own research and he was down to basically betting on Kyle Shanahan and Purdy or just Josh Allen, just no one else in the Buffalo building but Josh Allen, limits the market. I agree with you that it's interesting if he could have just done a 1 year by 1 year deal, just kind of going around contender to contender. Would have loved to have seen him with the Chiefs, but this is a pretty good fallback plan. It brings them a different dimension on offense. I think just they needed so desperately reliability, a big third down target who is just consistently open and is open when he's not open. And that's just not something that they've had throughout Kyle Shanahan's time there. I know they have fun with moving players around and maximizing stuff out of kind of C+B type receivers, but I still think Mike Evans is an absolute stud. I think he's still a A1 player at the position in the league. And so to drop him on top of that receiving core, I think is outstanding work.
People got scared, understandably, from the production. 368 yards, 8 games last year, but the tape looked good. The problem is the 33 years old, but that's why he's basically year to year. And you mentioned getting a lot out of lesser receivers. I could absolutely see a situation where Christian Kirk is playing on Thursday Night Football, has a relatively quiet season, but like lights up the Rams for 170 yards. And you're just like, wow, Christian Kirk. They also traded a 3rd-round pick for Osa Odigizua, a fascinating trade we hit from the Cowboys side earlier. They brought back Jay Greenlaw. I don't want to kill them on the contract until I see the actual numbers. It was reported as 7.5, but maybe that was up to, we'll see. I thought it was a great buy low on Nate Hobbs, who was a very highly sought after free agent last year for the Packers. That's an up to 4.5. So that might be a $2-3 million contract for a guy who was getting $10 million a year and still relatively young a year ago. I think they could work him out. They gave $10 million guaranteed. It's hilarious that Eddie Pinheiro got more guaranteed than Dre Greenlaw or Nate Hobbs. Shout out to Verdarian Lowe landing as a backup left tackle. I always said with the Patriots, like, he's a little better than people think. People just killing him. They lost Kendrick Bourne. They lost Bryce Huff, who retired. Juwan Jennings is still out there. The kind of takeaway there, in general, they still have plenty of cap space. $39 million. They have spent the most in cash on their roster in 2026, which is crazy because you look at this free agency haul. So that's older contracts that they're spending a lot of money on still. My takeaway, just big picture, is like the Seahawks lost some key players. The Rams and 49ers especially, like this offseason just feels very additive. They weren't, assuming Trent Williams is back, they're just adding, and they already had, pretty good rosters to begin with. Great when you're talking about the Rams. What do you think about the 49ers?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. They just added on to the roster. I still think there's major question marks about them defensively. I thought the Odigizua pickup was unbelievable value. I could not believe they snagged him for a third-round pick. It's everything they need. He's going to be at his best in their system. So I think that's a great signing for them. They do need that rookie class of last year to look like competent professional players. Otherwise, it's just going to fall apart on them again. So they still have a lot of work to do. I think just the spine, the defense needs to be thicker and stronger. They have kind of all the fun players and the juice. They just don't have reliability down along the interior outside of Fred Warner. It's like, that's it. He covers all the holes and he's coming back from a serious injury. And you just got to hope and pray that he's going to be the player he was before. And so still a little bit worried about that when you compare him to like the Rams in terms of the completion of the roster. But in terms of just the offseason and what they did, I don't know how they could do any better to get Mike Evans on that contract, to use only a third-round pick to get Odigizua. They would never got a player that talented for this year in the third round of the draft. And then the Nate Hobbs one you mentioned, loved that as a buy low flyer.
And it sounded like they were in on some of the other free agents out there, like Romeo Doubs initially. And like they were, I think, just ready, but also flexible. And I agree. I'm going to give them I'll give them an A- and a 91 for whatever they did. If they didn't get their top picks, they pivoted very well and to guys that give them really good value. And I suspect they're not done yet. It's more of a different conversation that you're right. They're really counting on Nick Bosa coming off of an injury, Fred Warner coming off of an injury, and they don't even know what they're going to get for George Kittle, and Trent Williams is up there. But that's just part of their team build. I think they need to keep getting younger. They need to do better in the draft in general. That's not part of the free agency grades. So, yeah, even as I'm talking about it, I might give them a little higher. I'll go 93 for the 49ers.
I would have gone A. The Greenlaw one, we'll see what the money is. I just think he's effectively cooked at this phase of his career. Maybe he can rediscover some of the magic with the Niners if he can stay on the field, but it felt like just a team bringing one of their guys back at a price that didn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, they said 7.5, and it didn't say up to, but we've seen some of these reports have been pretty shaky in the past. All right, let's wrap up with the Seahawks. Very strange offseason in a way. And I had to check my research, like Mike Evans, who might have limited his market. That's a good point, that he was just like, I'm picking this team, which is badass. He's made so much money, had such a great career. He might have picked his team, and Kyle Shanahan helped convince him to go. Let's go to the Seahawks, though, who only had 4 free agents that left. Like, they re-signed 2 of them, Josh Jobe and Rashid Shaheed. And then they lost Kenneth Walker, Kobe Bryant, Boye Mafe, Reek Woolen, who 3 of which were near the top of the market. And Reek Woolen had to settle for another deal. And that was all their free agents. There was usually there's like a list of 17, 20 people. And nope, that was basically it with just these really good players. And so I give them a little boost because they did a good job re-signing a lot of the players that would have been up for free agency previously. And Josh Jobe only gets 9.5 guaranteed. That was not as big a contract as it initially sounded. $8 million overall per year. And then Rashid Shaheed, I was surprised he did not get more money. He actually got less guaranteed money than Dobbs and Wan'Dale Robinson, around the same per year on a 3-year deal. Those moves make sense. It hurts to lose those good players, but kind of just kicking the can to this year and counting on development and saving some money, I think, for Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon, who are both up for big contracts.
Yeah, I agree with you. You can't retain everyone. It's just that simple. When the bad teams are going to overpay the champion to try and get the champion players in the building, you just can't. And I liked what felt like prioritizing Shaheed over Kenneth Walker. I thought that was significantly the better short-term and medium-term play, and it could have been pretty easy to be somewhat sentimental and just bet on one over the other and let Shaheed go to the market and maybe make even more money just out there in the open as a free agent. So
He did. That was what surprised me. He got out there, and then they ended up having the best offer for him, I assume, unless he gave them a discount.
But would you agree that they bet on Shaheed over Walker, or do you think
Yes.
they were just comfortable? I think that's just
No doubt.
the better path. And so to get Joe back at a cost-effective deal, that's usually the kind of player who does get overpaid to go away because he was on the championship team and he's like better than the league average, and therefore it gets a significant pay boost. So I just thought all around it was as good as they could do with the constraints they're working in, which is trying to keep this core together. And they won the thing early. They were early in the timeline of winning it, which is why they're not having to suffer with 15, 16 guys leaving.
And they are going to load up. I haven't checked on the comp picks. I mean, they're going to have a deluge of comp picks because it's about performance, but it's mostly about playing time and the amount of the contract that you signed elsewhere. So especially Boye Mafe, Kobe Bryant, and even Kenneth Walker, signed top of the market towards their position. And so they'll get some comp picks. And they did sign Emmanuel Wilson, who won't affect their comp pick formula because he was non-tendered by the Packers. So that is the one outside guy. If I was Emmanuel Wilson, who had a nice playoff moment there, I would feel special as the only player that the Super Bowl champions have brought into the building. They believe in him.
And I do feel like, I know we're grading where they're at now, but they are in line to be a place where they can hoover up the ring chasing guys later in the cycle, where it's like the 1 year deals. People will take the DeMarcus Lawrence path. Some of these kind of aging pass rushers who are like, I'm going to go sign a 1 year deal with someone. I do think they're in line to go and pick those players up.
All right, give me your grade. Last one of the day.
B plus, I guess.
Yeah.
I really love that they kept Shaheed in the building, and just that's about as well as they could have done. They had players they did not probably want to say goodbye to, but you can't keep everyone in house.
I'd love to find out how far they went on Kobe Bryant, who I think they just decided that's going to be too expensive for what we do, and we have some possible replacements, even though he was great for us. I believe, and I think there was some reporting that they were in on Mafe. Like they would have happily, I think, accepted him back if the price didn't get quite as high like they did with Shaheed, but you had to say goodbye to some guys. I'm going to, give a little bit of grade inflation because of the overall picture of what they've done has been really smart because they're the defending champs. I'll give them an 89 as well. If it was another team, the Jets, well, you can't even compare. Like if some other team had this exact offseason, they wouldn't be the Seahawks because they wouldn't have the roster that just won the freaking Super Bowl. Great job today, Ollie. You doubleheader this week. A lot of Ollie in the feed. I love it with the Jalen Waddle breaking news and now the NFC grades. And I think next time we'll talk NFL draft with you. And I'm working on, I haven't told you this, I might as well just tell you on air, a 40s and free agents episode, if you're down, with you and Daniel Jeremiah, and I'm just gonna throw red meat into the
dream,
into the middle of the ring, and you fight. Will you do that for me?
Fight DJ. I'm not sure if I would fight DJ. An intellectual sparring, I'm interested in. But a fight, let's see. He has some.
I just want to listen to that conversation. So
Okay.
it's just selfish.
There are some takes that I'm ready to pick up with Mr. Jeremiah that he has.
Okay, I like that. Let's hit that music and let's say goodbye. This is going to be an annual event, these free agency grades. So Eric, we apologize, Dad, for going so long. Not our last show of the week, though. We will be back in the studio, myself, Jordan Rodrigue, and Patrick Claybon. Can't wait for that one. Until then, yes, the regular season, I think, with this show is over.